if you don't have it in place, you should definitely consider it.
100%.
And if you have it in place and it's been templated and you just have them sign this thing that, is part of your onboarding package, go have a lawyer take a look at it. The laws and the rules are changing.
This is the PMP Industry Insider Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome out to another episode of the PMP Industry Insider Podcast, where we take a look at what is changing in the pest and lawn industries, and we take you to the front lines to those that are driving those changes. As always, I'm Donnie Shelton, owner of Triangle Home Services, which has Triangle Pest as well as Triangle Lawn. And with me is the ever so popular Mr. Dan Gordon. Dan, would you like to say good morning, introduce our topic, our sponsors, and then our guest?
Sure. Dan Gordon, PCO Bookkeepers, PCO M&A Specialists for your accounting and exit planning needs. Our sponsors, Coalmarch by WorkWave. If you're interested in digital marketing, visit them at coalmarch.com. And PestSure, if you're interested in insurance, general liability, workers' comp, and or auto. And I believe they offer others, maybe EPLI and whatnot. Visit them at pestsure.com. Our guests today are, drum roll please, Donnie and Dan.
There it is.
And what we're going to talk about, this is kind of a relevant topic because it came up and was a significant item in one of the M&A transactions that I did. But basically, it's non-competes and non-solicits. Okay. Before we even get started, just understand that this is not meant to be legal advice. Okay.
Normal disclaimers. Yes.
Right. It's meant to equip you with the right questions to ask your lawyer before implementing employment agreements that use non-competes or non-solicits. Okay. So just remember that we are not lawyers. I am a CPA and I have some business law that in order to be a CPA that you need to understand. And so I'll give you my very rudimentary understanding of the law. But this is kind of an interesting one because it comes up. So,
well, hang on. Before you get into that, I will put my disclaimer out. I'm not even a CPA. I'm just a big dumpster fire. So definitely don't listen to any legalese that I spout out. But, one of the things I was thinking about as you were introducing our sponsors, we actually do need to, and they even asked us to do this, but if you've not taken a look at the Beyond Service User Conference, WorkWave has put that on. Should be a good time. We're actually going to go this year at Triangle. I'm going to take a whole gaggle of folks down there, but it's kind of the combination of their Pest Pack, it's Real Green, it's CO2, it's kind of all those platforms. I think they have a couple more conferences that they're rolling into it as well. But down in Orlando, lovely land of Orlando, in January, I'm just looking up the dates. I think it's January 7th through the 10th. So if you've not taken a look at that, and you are wanting to go to a conference, that may be something for you to look at. I know it's a massive conference. They did it. The one year where they did it, it wasn't in Vegas. Where were we? Oh, they did a party at Vegas, but then they did Beyond Service after that. But the
Beyond Service is just, it's terrific. I have been to every Pest Pack user conference since it started. And I've spoken at just about everyone, and I'll be speaking again. So we're looking forward. We're bringing a bunch of our guys.
I always hear about the parties from Dan.
The parties are good. So Pest Pack and Real Green don't really. They're for different industries. Both of them try to cross into each other's industries. But the one thing that the biggest strength of Real Green before WorkWave bought them was their user conference and the party that they had. It was amazing.
We're not going to do that.
and just so that you know, WorkWave has taken that party to a totally new level.
Yes.
Last year was just unbelievable.
So, well, I didn't go to all the parties. I think I spoke at one of them, but actually I spoke at a couple, but I am not speaking this year. I'm just going to go incognito. I'm sure people won't even know who I am, which is perfectly fine. And I will walk around and try to soak up as much WorkWave knowledge as I possibly can. But anyway, just thought I would throw that out for our sponsor. They do a good job, and we absolutely use a lot of their products, and we're going. So with that, let's get into talking about non-competes and non-solicits. Now, you were talking about how in transactions, this is a big deal. I'm going to give the perspective of, as an active owner, what we do, what my concerns are, some things that I've had happen. And so why don't we start with you, Dan? And you said that this ends up being a big deal. Where do people get into issues with these things, especially?
Well, let's start. When you hire employees or you negotiate a merger and acquisition between companies, you want to create an agreement that protects you. And one of the important ways to do this is a non-compete or non-solicitation agreement. And that's a legal document that prevents another party from trying to hire, to get business from, or to obtain information from your business's employees or customers. So what is a non-compete? A non-compete is a contract between an employer and employee that prevents the employee working for a competitor or starting a competing business. Okay. In some states, non-competes are just outlawed. And by the way, the federal government, the Biden administration, is looking to get rid of non-competes in total. And so,
well, hang on. Let's back up here real quick, because here's the issue, right? I mean, if you're not familiar with non-competes, and I'm pretty sure folks who are listening to this, most are. These are fairly common in our industry. But in a lot of industries, one of the ways that you grow your business is that you find key people from your competitors and you hire them. And then when they switch over, they bring their entire customer base with them. And that's really, I think when a lot of people think about non-competes, that's what they're trying to prevent. I mean, like it or not, whether or not you want to admit it, whether or not you agree with it, I really don't care. The reality of it is that we are in a relationship business. That absolutely is fundamental. Like, it's less and less now than it used to be. But I mean, I tell this story all the time. My mother, God bless her soul, she uses a company that I'm not particularly crazy about, and I'm not going to name the company. And so I recommended to her that she use a company of one of my friends. She goes, well, Donnie Ray.
Wait a minute. Your mom uses a pest control company that you don't approve of?
I didn't say I don't approve of. I said that I'm not crazy about. Like, they're okay, right? But there's another one. Like, I have a really good friend in that market, which, by the way, I don't, if anyone's wondering, I don't service my mother's market, and I'm not driving 2.5 hours to go get my mom's house. Okay. So you can judge me now, but she uses a company, and I'm like, hey, you should use this other company because this is my buddy. And she goes, now, Donnie Ray, Ricky has been servicing our house for almost 20 years. I'm not changing companies. So that's the reality, right? I mean, from her own freaking son. Maybe that says more about me than her. I don't know, but but she absolutely said that, Ricky knows her house. She likes Ricky. Ricky's come over and Ricky takes care of her. And so I make that point because it just shows how strong these relationships are, and how people are not necessarily loyal to your brand. They're loyal to your people. And so
I was just going to say, whose customer is your mom, Ricky's or the company's?
That's exactly right. And so that's when, when these non-competes, and we're talking about non-competes, this is the real issue. And I think this is why, for me personally, I don't care as much about a non-compete. And I know we've not defined all these terms. I care more about a non-solicit. A non-solicit to me is way more important than a non-compete. I don't really care if someone leaves Triangle and they decide to start their own thing. Okay, fine. I don't care if someone just leaves Triangle and decides, hey, we're going to go work for a competitor. That's fine too. I mean, I don't like it, of course, but I'm not trying to kill it.
Let's back up. So there's a couple of things: non-competes and non-solicits. Yep. So this notion that the government wants to get out of non-competes, and it's it's enforceable in certain states. To be enforceable, a non-compete has to include an offer, acceptance, intent, and a benefit or consideration to the employee exchange for their promise. Okay. What that means is that I taught you came into my company and I taught you pest control, and therefore you can't go and leave and work for a competitor. Now, I think most people would say that that's unreasonable. if you don't take customers or employees, right? And that's what a non-compete is, and that's what certain states and now the federal government's trying to do away with. And I'm not.
Well, hang on. It's not that broad, though. I mean, most non-competes, they're going to limit based on geography. Like I teach you.
Yes.
I'm going to teach you. I'm going to do all of that, but you can't in my area now. You can still do all of that. You just can't do it in my area. Some broad one that would be like ever, I'd be like, hell no. You're not,
No, there's a time limit and there's a geography.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
But a non-solicit, they're not going after non-solicits. Non-solicit is what you're really, really, that's the thing that you want to, that's the thing that you want to make sure that is built into your employment agreement, right?
Well, let's define non-solicit, because again, we started defining the non-compete, but let's get over to what a non-solicit is and how it's different than a non-compete, because they are two different things.
So a non-solicit is a contract in which an employee agrees not to solicit a company's clients or customers, and or for lack of a better term, poach their employees for their own benefit or the benefit of a competitor after leaving the company. Okay. So, and again, you also have to have a specified date range, like 2 years, 3 years, whatever, a geographic area, and a reasonableness clause. So those are those are some of the things that you want to do. So non-solicits are sometimes in some states unenforceable. Okay. Mm-hmm. But most courts are likely to be more sympathetic to a non-solicit than a non-compete. Okay. Now, here's the most obvious thing. Why do we need non-solicits? Okay.
Yeah.
So, by the way, it's not just employees. A lot of people will make independent contractors, and I don't mean like subcontractors if you're subcontracting fumigation. I mean, if you bring in somebody to help you with to move your business in the right direction. I almost want to say, I don't know, some sort of consulting, leadership consulting, that kind of thing, right? A lot of people will have the subcontractor or the 1099 person sign a non-solicit. Okay.
So hang on. I want to pause you there because this is a really important point. I don't even know how to go about saying this. So I'm going to try and we'll see where it goes. But so I have a friend of mine and he's a good friend. He's not in our industry. Good guy, upbeat guy, whatever. During COVID, he worked 2 full-time jobs. Now, how did he work 2 full-time jobs, Dan?
I wouldn't know. And nobody who worked for me worked 2 full-time jobs. Well, I only caught one person working 2 full-time jobs.
Yeah. So basically, it's this whole work from home thing that legitimately he worked for 2 different companies and he did just enough not to get canned, and he got 2 full-time jobs.
Now, were the 2 full-time jobs in the same industry with competing companies?
Yes.
Yeah, that's probably not so good.
And what's funny is you ever have a conversation with someone and they ask you for advice, and I'm never going to tell someone you got to do A, B, or C. Well, I shouldn't say I won't ever do that. My children would absolutely disagree with that. But outside of my kids, I would never say, well, you need to do this, you need to do that. But so we have this conversation over the phone, and I'm telling him everything, like just not, morality, ethics, conflict of interest. Can you really, I'm going through, can you really give both all your full time? I'm going through all of these different things. And at the end of the conversation, I'm thinking, okay, I've made it obviously clear this is not a good idea. He goes, yep, I know what I'm doing. Thanks, man. That's the validation I needed. I was like, what happened? My guess is that his mind was already made up, and it didn't really matter what I said. I could be like, you're going to get, this, and then he'd be like, great. But long story short.
By the way, if you have a full-time gig and whatnot, and you need extra money for your family and you want to flip hamburgers at night, as long as you don't flip hamburgers during the day, then
But in this case, this was obvious.
Yes.
Like there were so many hours. It was not a full-time gig, although he was getting paid full-time for both. By the way, he doesn't do this anymore, but he did it during COVID. He did it shortly after COVID as well. And now that folks are bringing people back into the office, this is becoming less and less common, but it is a thing. Don't think for a moment that it's not. And I'm bringing it back around to this, this whole idea of 1099 contractors. You absolutely need to put your folks under this, because the reality of it is that, like it or not, they absolutely could be a 1099 contractor helping someone do the very same things that you're doing, and it be legal and legit. So something to think about. It's, I had never even heard of this. I'm like, what? Like when he told me this idea, I'm like, well, that's crazy. Like it didn't even cross my mind that someone would even have, but it's pretty damn common in this work from home environment. I say it's common. I don't know how many folks are doing it. This has been just my experience, but ultimately, when I think about someone on my staff being solicited by one of my competitors to do contract work on the side for thing, that to me that's a little dirty.
I think so. Yeah.
That feels a little icky. And I want some sort of protection in place that says, hey, look, that's off limits. If you want to work in your off time, fine. But you are not to work for a competitor, doing the same things that you're doing at our company. That's where I kind of draw the line. And so anyway, so getting back to this whole idea of making sure that your contractors, or that your current full-time employees can't act in a contractor role in your same industry. Like that's something that I would be paying attention to. And that was something I would be looking into. So anyway, let's keep going.
Well,
it's an important
so why do you need
made.
them? Obviously, you want to keep them from stealing your customers and employees and use it as a deterrent. But here's one that you might not have thought of unless you've been toying with selling your company. And we work in the M&A space and whatnot, and this comes up all the time. But it's extremely important if you're thinking of selling your company. In fact, it can kill a deal if you don't have the right non-solicits in place that are assignable, right? Because when you sell your company, what are you really selling? You're selling your customer relationships. You're selling an assembled workforce. You're selling, are there any real trade secrets in pest control?
You're selling your system, right? I mean, legitimately, you're selling your system. And if there's no guarantees that system is going to continue once you depart and the check's written, then that's not very valuable. Like if you don't have that locked in. Not to say that, can you imagine deals? And I've seen this happen where there's an acquisition that happens and now everyone has to sign a new non-compete. You talking about going over like a fart in church. I mean, it is absolutely not. People don't, and it happens, but it's just like,
So one of the things, my limited understanding of the law from being a CPA, is a contract is made where two things are exchanged. You exchange you tell me that you're going to do something, or you're not going to do something, or you're going to give me something, and I have to give you consideration. So it's got to be a trade, right? So normally when you hire somebody, they'll sign a non-compete or non-solicit, and the consideration is you giving them a job. But once they have that job, and if you haven't put that in place, how do you get a non-solicit in place after you hear this podcast and you say, I really ought to do this and whatnot? Well, the first thing you should do is go to your lawyer and make sure that, that you have a well-written document. But how do you get somebody who's already employed to sign one of these things? You want to talk about a fart in church. Okay, listen, you want to keep your job? That's not really consideration, right?
Yeah.
So I've seen one that was pretty creative. This is not that common, but where, you offer the employee actual cash. Here's $500. You need to sign this. That's
So
consideration.
let me pause you there, because I've had direct experience with this exact issue in other businesses, not in our industry. And what I ended up doing was, when I sold, I took a portion of that sales and I wanted to bonus those to help me build it. And what I did is I packaged it with that bonus. And I said, okay, this transaction's happening. As part of this transaction, we obviously want you to stay, and by the way, here's what's required in order for us to progress with. And the bonuses were substantial. They were not like, a freaking $20 Home Depot card, right? I mean, they were pretty doggone substantial. And so what I did was I packaged it with that bonus for that exact reason. What you just said was because now they already and I didn't want them. The last thing I want, I mean, there's things that you can do that are legal that are icky. And there's like, you know what I mean? Like you win, but you don't really win. In this case, what I wanted them to feel like they got a super good win, and they make the commitment to the buyer, because ultimately, I want the buyer to win as well. And so everyone kind of gets something out of the deal, right? And the buyer's winning, I'm winning, and the person who's staying is winning. And so I would just say that if you find yourself in that situation, that is something that you can do. It's an option I've done, and it was pretty effective in our case.
So what you're describing is something called a stay bonus, right? And we work with those all the time, where basically the owner, when they sells his company, might have some contingency where they like an earn out, right? So I'm going to pay you $1 million for your company, but I'm going to give you 800,000, and we have to do X, Y, and Z, and you'll get the other 200,000. Okay. So, and it's probably very doable. However, if your key person decides to leave, then it's not so easy. So maybe you offer your key person 20,000, 50,000, whatever, to stay and to make sure that whatever it is that you committed to do, whether it's, keeping certain customers and whatnot, you would earn, or he would earn, that stay bonus after a certain period of time. And that's very common in the M&A world. But we had a deal. It was an awesome deal. And it was with one of the big strategics, and it was worth, 9 digits. And we got to diligence, and the general manager was he was pretty integrally involved in the business. And usually when we go into these diligence meetings, it's just the owner, because they don't want anybody to know that maybe that they're selling and whatnot. But this general manager, he knew it. We brought him into the diligence because he was part of top management. And when the topic came up about the non-competes or non-solicits, they noticed that he didn't have one. And he was asked about it. And he said, I will not sign that document. And that deal died.
Because he would not sign.
Yeah. And the owner almost made him die. But
I was going to say, how did you get these guys in the same? Does he still have a job? Like, did he?
No, he had left. And the problem was he didn't have this, and he did take a little, piece of the business because he, and which is totally unethical and whatnot, but there was no agreement in place. Right. And turns out that this guy did some other shady things, and they were able to get the law on him and whatnot. And ultimately, probably about 2.5 years later, we were able to sell the company. But to be honest, the company sold for less than what we originally had, because the company was a little smaller, because this guy had stolen some customers and they didn't recover. So that's an interesting one.
It is an interesting one. So just backing up here and going big picture, if you're listening to this, I think there's probably a couple things I would be thinking about. Number one is, if you have a non-compete, are you really wanting a non-compete, or do you want a non-solicit? I'm asking myself this question. I know that we have both. I don't know how solid it is. I mean, after that, I will tell you, one of the reasons I do this podcast is because it forces me to look at things I don't typically look at. And non-solicits, it's not something that's super sexy. It's not growing the business. It's not something that I'm focused on all the time, but it absolutely is important. And I've had legitimately at least twice since I've been in business where I had someone who either I let go or someone left, and they started soliciting. And I made a phone call and I said, listen, you're only going to get one phone call. If I hear of you doing this any longer, the next time I'm going to pull you into court, and we're going to battle this out. In both cases, the person that was doing it, they stopped, right? I mean, usually I won't, and by the way, by me saying this, I don't want anyone to, this is not my ego talking, or maybe it is, hell, I don't know. But most of the time I try to keep pretty good relationships with people that work with me and for me. And, I'm not going to say I've had that with everyone. There's been some people that have absolutely it was a delight to can them, to get rid of them because they didn't belong for some reason that they did, but normally, if I make a phone call, I'm like, look, man, I don't want to prevent you from working in our industry, but I spent a lot of money and I've put a lot of time into building our customer base, and that's not for your taking. It's not open for you to do that. You don't have a right to do that. And so bringing it back around, for me, I am way more concerned about the non-solicit than I am about the non-compete, because I could care less if you go work for someone else or if you start your own thing. I just don't want you taking out the value of what we spent, because I can tell you, most people who work in pest and lawn industries, they don't really generate all the business, right? The marketing is, they don't put the dollars in to create the customers. Now they help service them, and I'm not making light of what they do, but they're part of the operations. They're not necessarily part of the generation, and it's a lot of money. You talk about 10%.
Well, you can have the non-solicit embedded in the non-compete. You can have one agreement, right? So
yes.
one of the clauses that you normally see in contracts, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so talk to your lawyer about this, but usually like one of the last pieces of a contract say, if one of these clauses are invalidated, it doesn't mean that all of them are. Yeah. Right. So if you knock out one piece, it doesn't mean that the others are. So
isn't that called like severability or something like that?
Yeah. Ooh, look at you. Huh?
Oh gosh. No.
Bug guy. Huh?
I'm dumb on a box of rocks. So anyway, bringing it back around, I think probably at least for me, I kind of view non-competes, non-solicits the way I do contracts for customers, meaning that, am I going to take someone to task and we're going to battle it out in court? Probably not. Probably not. If someone calls in to cancel, we're going to be like, well, you signed a contract. If they're like, you're an effing idiot, I'm not paying anything, I hate your guts, go to hell, I'm going to be like, no problem. You know what? We'll you know what I'm saying? I'm going to end the agreement right there, because the last thing I want to do is keep that personal service. But, there's phone calls that we don't get because people understand, well, I signed an agreement. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so bringing that back around, for me, I think, a non-compete, a non-solicit, it's more about it being a deterrent, right? It's more about it being something where, I have this option in my pocket. I can go to battle if I want to, but if someone leaves and I find out they're working for a competitor, they're not going to get a phone call. I'm not going to chase them. I'm not calling the other owner, whatever. If someone goes and is working for a competitor or starts their own business, and then all of a sudden every customer on that route or big customers on that route is now going to the new company or going to this newly started company, now we're going to go to battle. Now we got something, now it's that's something totally different. So for me, that's in the operations side. Dan, I'm sure you're thinking of on the M&A side, what it does for you on the M&A side. Maybe just talk about that real quick. And then I'm assuming that if you've got a timeline in the next 5 years, this is probably not a discussion you want to have in due diligence.
The first thing you need to do is, even if you have them in place and they're old templated, go have your attorney or an attorney check it out and make sure that what you have is good and it's enforceable. You were talking about enforcing various contracts, and most people in this industry, if you've been around long enough, you've gotten a nastygram or sent a nastygram from an attorney reminding a person of their responsibilities who signed one of these things.
Right.
And or, maybe something a little stronger if they started to steal customers or employees or whatnot. But you definitely want to have these agreements in place. The whole non-compete thing is in flux. I believe it's next spring where, the FTC, who is kind of in charge of this, is going to make their decision. The proposed rule, let's see. So they pushed it off to next spring. And I'm sure that they're having discussions about it. But even if non-competes are outlawed, non-solicits will not be, I don't think. It would be crazy to do that. And so you need to have one of these things in place.
Well, one of the things that I have not spent a ton of time talking about, which I think is important, is this whole idea of non-solicits on your team. And the reason I'm not talking about it is because it's so dang slick. Like, how do you, if you're on LinkedIn now, people are reaching out and soliciting you all the time. And so for me, like, if you have people that are leaving your company and they're going to work for another competitor, and you've got a role of 2, 3, or 4, I just think going to battle and going to court over that, I don't know if there's a win there. And the reason is because it would be so difficult for you to show that specific person, even if it was someone else different in that company that was soliciting, is that illegal? Nope. And the reality of it is like, I mean, I guess my point is like, here, if you have a team and you start losing your team to one of your competitors, I think you're going to be much better served taking a good look in the mirror than, pulling out the lawyer army and spending a ton of money on basically chasing dead weight.
But also it's normal. This weekend was a holiday weekend. I was out on a boat with 2 friends, and both of them just took new jobs, both different industries, one in the hospitality industry, one in the telematics industry, and both took 2 jobs, and they're pretty high powered guys. And we were talking, and, both of them, I'll get myself acclimated there, and then I'll bring my team over. And I was like, oh, really?
Yeah.
What does that do to, ownership of where you left? So it's definitely a problem. So
it is absolutely a problem. But I guess my point is that bringing it back around to enforcing a non-solicit, and maybe there's some listeners out there who have successfully done this or think it's a good strategy. I personally don't think it is. And the reason is because if you hire someone, first of all, as an owner, and they start bringing all of, quote unquote, their people, is that really a good strategy for you as an owner? That's the first question you should be asking yourself. And if you're cool with it, fine. Second thing is that now when that person leaves and all of a sudden all of your leadership leaves with them, and then you go to, like, you're all pissed off and you're like, well, I'm going to rip out the attorneys and go after this person. How are you really going to, in court, show, unless it was that specific person that was doing the soliciting? Because it would be so different.
You can enforce it, but the question is, how much money is it worth? And I probably would make an example so that people don't, as a deterrent. You need to do that. You need to protect your turf. But
by the way, this is where Dan and I, this is where we depart.
It'll cost you money, but you've got to do it to show people that you're not going to be, that you're not going to come in here and strip out my leadership and or my customers. So anyway, I think listen, like I said, disclaimer, we're not attorneys. Check with your attorney. But I think that this is something that if you don't have it in place, you should definitely consider it. 100%. And if you have it in place and it's been templated and you just have them sign this thing that, is part of your onboarding package, go have a lawyer take a look at it and make sure that it's enforceable and that it serves your needs, because the laws and the rules are changing, and also the court rulings, as well. So just make sure that you do that.
But just realize, and I have to say this disclaimer, even having all of this, there's no way to completely block someone.
It's going to cost you money.
It never will be. I mean, it's a deterrent, right? I mean, that's really how you need to view this. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't put a good attorney on it and have some really solid agreements in place. All I'm saying is just watch your expectations. Don't get in a place where it's like, my non-solicit is rock solid and no one's going to get past it. And I just think those are the wrong expectations. So, all right. Anything else to add, Dan, or you think we're good here on this topic?
I think we're good on the topic.
All right. Just a reminder that all the resources and topics that we talked about today are available on the podcast website, pmpindustryinsider.com. And we always appreciate any kind of positive ratings and reviews you can give us. If you can reach out to us on Apple, Spotify, and our newly minted YouTube channel, which is continuing to grow, which we really, really like. We enjoy that platform, mainly because you get to see Dan's beautiful face. And if you have complaints, comments, concerns, anything negative in nature, please pass that along to Dan. And with that, we're signing off. We'll see you all next time.
See ya. Take care.
Now.